I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about what it means to be a servant leader in the warehouse, in the warehouse supervisor scene, as that's a very relevant, very important aspect of who we are as a company. And in being a servant leader, one of the most important things that we need to recognize and understand and realize is that we are now responsible for showing care to the individuals, right? And whatever that means in the day-to-day, whether it's connecting on a personal level or working towards developing them into whatever that next state is. I'd really like to focus in and talk through what it does mean to develop your team, what that goal setting can look like, and some reporting best practices that can really set up your team for success so that in your role, you're being the best servant leader that you can be, while also taking and showing that extra care to your team to make sure that they feel empowered to do those additional, whether that's tasks or own individual pieces of the business. I think a really important thing that we need to kind of set in order to set the tone of what we're about to talk about is leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those who are in your charge. That's a quote by Simon Sinek, a fantastic leadership speaker, right? And really, it hits the crux of we're here for them, and if we put that trust and love in it, they will work with and for us, right? So the first thing I mentioned was the focus on developing your team, and why should you? So one of the most relevant reasons to develop your team is to create that bench, right? Whether that's to ensure that when there's time spent where you're gone or that you move on to whatever that next step is, you want to have the trust that you've very well developed your team so that your excellence continues on instead of a temporary success. People have probably heard those stories where they were such an asset in the company, but then when they left, everything went to shambles. And I challenge that that's not necessarily a failure on the company as much as a failure in the mentality of what being a leader is, right? Creating that excellence that's going to endure past that individual success. And we also have to recognize that your success depends on the success of your team and developing them, encouraging and empowering them. The greatest contribution of a leader is to create more leaders. When we create follower mentalities or followers, what we inadvertently do is create that situation where when the leader's no longer present, there's not a lot of confidence or empowerment for them to be able to then operate on their own, and we want that. We want that because we care for them. We want that because we want them to take that next step. And arguably, if that is something that happens, for all you know, your direct report might become your peer. And what a better way to build rapport than to have worked through that and had that success story with that individual, right? To be a part of their path in the company. It's incredibly important to develop your team. Now, what does that look like? So we all know that in a goal-setting perspective, we always want to pursue what's next and create those goals. You should be looking at a quarterly or even annually rough, high-level plan of setting some SMART goals. SMART being they need to be specific, measurable, they need to be achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So we can't just have arbitrary things. We have to be able to have, these are goals that we can set and say, let's check back on them in 2 weeks and see if there was or wasn't success. Now, we're creating those goals as a leader, but I challenge you to take the next step to say, let's plan them out in advance and then develop our team members by allowing them to own some of those projects. Nothing empowers a team member more to say, hey, this is your piece of the business. You are now a stakeholder. And then obviously with partnerships on quarterly one-on-ones or weekly, whatever that cadence needs to be, checking in on those individual goals, projects, and allowing them to report out on that creates a adamant, strong culture of this team member is ready to own those pieces and arguably maybe ready to create their own. And once you have that system kind of in place and your team members begin to feel empowered, you then get into a position where you're not creating the goals anymore, right? They have thought through process management, I could do this differently, and now I know how to pursue doing it differently. Part of that challenge too is staying up to date with relevant businesses and their practices and challenging your team to. But when we're setting goals in that aspect and then allowing our team to really own pieces of the puzzle, it gives them that ownership and allows them to feel more empowered in declaring their intent of what they're doing or what that solution is, instead of asking for permission, right? Another way that you can definitely empower and develop your team is by not only separating out reports or pieces of potentially your business that they may be able to own, but then at the next step too, have them not only empowered to, I guess, answer questions before they're asked through a reporting standpoint, whether they own, a specific metric and they report it out daily to you. Challenge them to report it out weekly to your people leader as a supervisor. Let them have that communication with the assistant general manager, right? Allow them that space so that they're able to feel confident that yes, they know the path or whatever, they understand that you're their people leader, but at the same time, you understand and respect that, hey, there's trust here, and I trust that you're going to deliver the correct information. And not only that, I want you to do it weekly to my boss, right? I don't like using the term boss, but you know what I mean. Just as leaders, this is how we build confidence, right? There's a need to create this kind of self-empowered leader who can operate on their own. And if you create leaders in this way, then you're also creating leaders who will create future leaders instead of that follower situation that really doesn't allow them to be in the best, most inspiring space. Another piece of that same puzzle is, I mentioned it briefly, but having those monthly, quarterly one-on-ones for kind of touching base on those reporting best practices and allowing them that space to have that trust and conversation as well is something that you want to do. You're in a unique position now where all of your team members that'll directly report to you are leaders in their own right. And that requires you to adjust your leadership style just a little bit to recognize that they want that stakeholder ownership. Kind of reeling it all back in, just kind of briefly. So it's important to develop your team just to show that care, empower them, create your own bench for whatever that next step is, but also ensure that when you move on to the next role, your legacy will stay within that building and it will continue to be successful. Set goals for individual team members, metrics that they can own, and then allow them to report out on some of those metrics or goals as well. In addition to that, I'd like to close with a quote I've kind of alluded to throughout this speech, but success comes and goes, but excellence endures when success moves on. That's a quote from Truett Cathy, a very well-known and well-respected business owner in Chick-fil-A. And I think it really captures what we're trying to do here as a company, as a recognition that there's a difference between succeeding in the day-to-day and ensuring excellence in the future. And I think if we do show this care and make a focus to develop your team and allow them to have that pride in owning pieces of the business and report out on those pieces, I think you're going to find that you're really inspiring and developing future leaders and building a very tight-knit relationship in what otherwise would be a very difficult role, being a people leader of people leaders. Thank you for your time.